Welcome to this segment of Yavapai Speaks. My guest is Senator Mark Finchem. He's the senator from LD-1. That's all of Yavapai County. And for those of you who receive this outside of Arizona, Yavapai County is about the size of New Jersey, all kidding aside. It goes from Sedona to Cottonwood to Baghdad to Prescott and all over. So the senator has a large district and he's in session and he's got only so many minutes. So this is going to be a short session. He does a monthly town hall here in Prescott. So if you're in Yavapai County, you should see the posters being broadcast that they're on Thursdays about 6 o'clock at the Palace in downtown Prescott. So, Senator, thank you. I know you're in between meetings and sessions on the floor. So give us an update on what's taking place thus far in the Senate.
Well, so for those that live in Arizona, I go back to Kirsten Sinema many years ago, our U.S. Senator. She said that Arizona is the meth lab of politics. Yeah, she's pretty much right. In fact, she nailed that one right on the head. So this session so far, we've got almost all of the Senate bills out of the Senate. We've voted on most of them. I think we have a couple left to do today. Then we will start hearing. In fact, we've started to hear the House bills that passed out of the House, and then they come to the Senate. For those that don't understand the mechanics of government, the Senate will hear bills and craft legislation. We go through our process, hearings, and vote it off the floor and formally adopt it. Then we will send that over to the House. Well, the House does the exact same thing, and then we swap bills. So this past week is what's known as crossover week, where everything left the Senate, went over to the House, and everything is supposedly left the House and went over to the Senate. So yesterday, for example, I testified on 3 of my bills. 2 of them have to do with unemployment insurance and individuals who commit unemployment insurance fraud, filing for unemployment insurance in more than one state. No, don't do it. You're going to get caught. The other 2 were cryptocurrency bills. One is adopting cryptocurrency as a legal tender specie. That's a really important term for folks to understand. Here in Arizona, gold and silver are considered gold and silver bullion are considered legal tender. In other words, you can pay all debts, public and private, with gold or silver. In fact, my favorite is something called a gold back. People go to goldback.com and take a look at that. They're a fascinating thing. They look like printed money, but they are 24 karat gold. So it adds a new twist to what you would call bills, because typically a U.S. Federal Reserve note is evidence of debt. Yeah, it's not really money, it's fiat currency. But gold and silver that is pounded out in these sheets with a beautiful artwork on them, by the way, that is real money. So we've got that, but we added cryptocurrency because of the adoption of things like XRP, Bitcoin. While Bitcoin is more of a commodity because of the volatility of it and the amount. So, for example, 1 Bitcoin right now is in the neighborhood of between 82,000 US dollars, and I've seen it as high as $105,000 per coin. So you have generally folks who didn't get into the cryptocurrency world, 10, 15 years ago, they had to pay a pretty penny for it. The folks that got into it before that, I mean, I've spoken with a few people that bought Bitcoin when it was $1. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've got a dozen Bitcoin. Okay, that means you're a multimillionaire, quite frankly. So, but cryptocurrency is a fascinating tool to help engage in commerce. So the whole point of money is to engage in commerce and trade, and it's a mechanism to settle payment for goods and services. That's all it is. So now we have this interesting paradigm shift. In fact, this is a geopolitical shift as well. It's something called the decentralized finance model, which essentially blows up the Federal Reserve which came to us by way of international banking barons back in 1913 with Jekyll Island. And many would say, and I would agree with this position, that the Federal Reserve is frankly an illegal organization under the U.S. Constitution. Under the theory of non-delegation, U.S. Treasury did not have the authority, nor did Congress have the authority, to delegate its responsibility to coin money to a private concern. And that's what the Federal Reserve is. It's kind of like FedEx. It's not federal. It may be an express service, but it's not federal. Just like the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor is it a reserve. They haven't got a damn dime.
Yeah.
Except for what they print. So interestingly enough, with cryptocurrency, particularly with XRP, which is my favorite, I can pay for goods and services without using a credit card. That means that neither the customer nor the merchant has to pay that 2.75% fee for the convenience of using a credit card. In fact, the cost of that transaction, no matter what the transaction is, because it's not a function of the size of the transaction, is 0.00001 cent. It's immediate settlement. So instead of for a merchant having to wait for 24 to 48 hours for the money to actually arrive in his or her bank account, it's immediate settlement. They get it now. Anybody who's familiar with something called Zelle, Zelle, that's a money transfer thing. Venmo is another one. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like Zelle and Venmo on steroids. Those go directly into a bank, typically a Federal Reserve bank using an ACH number. Don't need it anymore. Now, one of the public policy problems that is the U.S. foreign policy has been based on doling out money to other countries that we wanted to influence for decades. Well, that's a failed public policy, quite frankly, because the money never makes it to the people. It makes it to the leaders and goes directly into hip national bank. It goes in their pocket. It doesn't go or their offshore bank account in Switzerland or wherever. So this poses a new problem, and that is, how do you track the transfer of funds from one country to another, from drug cartels to whomever they want to pay off? So there's going to be some serious public policy conversations. But I think that the fact that the public has already adopted this as a means of payment, a means of engaging in commerce, the states are just now getting caught up. Mm-hmm. Even the federal government, by the way, the U.S. Treasury is buying up Bitcoin and XRP. So that tells you that they have an interest. They recognize that this is a coming thing. Actually, it's already here. And then, of course, we have an organization called SWIFT, which is it's the international bank's means of transferring money from one country to another and making sure that the system is secured, that the money really is there, that the money really is transferred. So the SWIFT system also records those transactions. And this is the kind of stuff that states really need to pay attention now. The federal government has failed us in the management of money and currency, even though that's their responsibility. Now the states are taking an active look at, all right, how do we protect ourselves from a U.S. dollar that constantly fluctuates? Case in point, yesterday, gold rose to $3,028 per ounce. When I retired in 1999, if I remember correctly, gold was something on the order of $895 to $900 an ounce. That doesn't mean that gold became more valuable. Gold doesn't change. It is what it is. It has intrinsic value. What that means is it now takes 3 times the U.S. dollars, the fiat currency issued by the Federal Reserve, takes 3 times that to buy gold. Now, here in the state of Arizona, you don't buy gold. You don't buy silver. You don't pay sales tax on it because it is a legal tender specie. I'm trying to bring everything full circle back.
Yeah.
You exchange one currency for another. You don't buy it. Just like, think of it this way: you don't buy quarters. You go into a bank or you go into a store and say, "Hey, can you change or make change for my dollar bill? I need to have 4 quarters to feed the gas or the air inflation machine out. Well, I guess it takes $2 now to fill your tires with air out in front of the gas station. Okay, so here's two $1 bills. I need to have 8 quarters. That's an exchange. You don't buy the quarters. It's the same way with gold and silver now, and we're trying to introduce cryptocurrency as one of those things that is an exchange. It's not a purchase.
Okay, that's fascinating. And Arizona is really taking a lead in this, I understand, through you and in conjunction with the Trump administration. Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Real quickly, and then let's come on back around in another week or so, and you can fill in the blanks. But real quickly, you have successfully brought monies into Yavapai County for the rodeo. That's been a big discussion, argument, debate for the last couple of months because a lot of people thought you were doing the wrong thing and money should go into firefighting. You were successful bringing the monies into the rodeo in Prescott, the world's oldest rodeo. Can you very briefly, and I know you're going to follow up on this on another day, both publicly here in Yavapai County and then on the show, but can you explain what you did and how successful that was and why it was successful?
Well, it actually was a very simple thing. I think it was 5 words in the law. So if we go back to 2023, then Senator Ken Bennett and Representative Nguyen and Bliss authored a bill that would send $15 million that was intended to be infrastructure money to ostensibly the City of Prescott. Let's just call it that. Well, unfortunately, they ran afoul of the Arizona Constitution, which prohibits under the gift clause the giving of money to organizations and there's some rules behind it that I'm not going to belabor the point. It was in violation of the Arizona gift clause, and a couple of individuals decided to sue the state and the Rodeo Foundation. That's not their real name, but I'm just going to use that for shorthand, and tried to block the use of that money. Well, that money's been sitting with the state treasurer now for 2 years, and about $250,000 has been spent in litigation. What I did was redirect the money from the Rodeo Foundation to the City of Prescott. So to be clear, the City of Prescott is the landlord. They have a lease with the Rodeo Foundation. That would be the tenant. It's a very simple change in law. Now, it's an amendment to existing law. It's not new law. If we'd have done anything else, that money would have been lost back into the general fund, and the much needed rejuvenation and repairs to the city park that is leased to the Rodeo Foundation would not happen. Now, it is part of a larger program that people probably don't appreciate, but the City of Prescott has passed 2 sales tax items. One is 0.75 cents, and I think 0.75%, and then the other is 0.95% to fund public safety, firefighting, and all that. Well, that's all well and good, but what is the number one tax collection driver for the City of Prescott? It would be the rodeo. Mm-hmm. And it's an attraction where people from all over the country, well, actually all over the world, come to compete. So for 2 weeks, think of it this way. It's kind of like Black Friday after Thanksgiving, but only it's 2 weeks. That's when the City of Prescott fills up their tax coffers and pays for many of the services that people in the metropolitan Prescott area seem to enjoy: fire, police, EMS, a community hospital, those kinds of things. So now we have has passed out of the Senate a bill that amends the 2013 statute authorizing the distribution of money, and it is going to the City of Prescott not to the 501c3 that is the rodeo operations. City of Prescott is physical plant. That's their lane. Mm-hmm. Operations is up to the Rodeo Foundation. So I think that we've got a solution that makes moot the legal proceeding, the litigation. In fact, one of the people who's a litigant that brought that has basically said, look, if this passes out of the House and Senate and the governor signs it, we no longer have an argument. There's no reason for us to be in court. And because of that, it would make the case moot.
I find it fascinating, and I know we've got to go, and I'm going to ask you one more question, and we'll cut it off for today. I found this argument the last couple of months fascinating, excuse me, that you were misdirected, and I think you know this. You were misdirected in trying to get these funds for the rodeo, that all of your energy should have gone into firefighting the forests, and all that money should have gone there. It couldn't have, and that's another day, another show. You could not have done that. But the rodeo brings in about a 10-day period, over $27 million to Prescott. And so if you had taken these funds and put them somewhere else, which you could not have done, and that would have been a mess, the rodeo would not have been able to fix up, I'm not using the right words, but improve the grounds. And it needs 50 new bathrooms. It needs new stadiums. It needs this and that to make itself really viable to keep bringing in the people. So I found this argument these last couple of months really incredible. And even when you were successful in spearheading the $15 million for the city to fix the rodeo grounds, which the city owns, you were under attack because you were misspending your time and energy. I just found that fascinating. Yeah, I know we'll come back to that on another day. And in fact, maybe what might be good is to bring you in and the fire chief and both of you. I just thought of that. That's why it's my show. I'm really good. Now, I know you got to go, but real quickly, when do you think the Senate and the House might adjourn? When may they do sine die?
That is the annual question. No idea.
Okay.
A lot of that has to do with the fact that we have a spendthrift Democrat governor and we have a conservative Republican legislature. There are some pretty robust discussions, fistfights. No, they're not fistfights. They're verbal fistfights over priorities. Now, and I would like to touch just briefly on the whole kerfuffle about the, fire and that. It's pretty juvenile and sophomorish, if you don't mind, to have the worldview that you can only address one thing at a time. And there are some individuals that, quite frankly, they're rodeo haters. But here's the legal principle for those people that don't like the rodeo, that moved into the area. They moved to the nuisance. Think about that for a minute. If you don't like the rodeo, if you don't like noise, you don't like traffic, you never should have moved there. You shouldn't have bought the property. So you don't have standing in court to try and take down the rodeo. You moved to the nuisance, okay? And that's a legal precedent that was set actually down in Phoenix when you had a developer that started building houses next to a feedlot, and all of a sudden people are complaining about the odor from cattle and flies. Okay, well, you knew that when you bought the house, okay? So you don't have a standing. With the rodeo funding, what I'm trying to be really clear about, there's a single purpose, and that was negotiated in a funding package 2 years ago. We don't have access to do anything with that money other than send it to the place where the then legislature directed it to go. And that is for rodeo operations. So for the individuals who were complaining about where that money was going, it should be redirected to firefighting. Well, I have helped to direct millions of dollars into wildland and forest fire, firefighting, fire suppression, fire treatment capabilities for the state. Now, what they don't point out, and I find this very disappointing, the vast majority of land that is at risk is national forest. We don't have the authority as a state to go in and treat meaning thin, national forest land. Now, I've been on the bully pulpit now for nigh on 12 years talking about why do we have national forests that are so mismanaged that they burn to a cinder. And when you have these super hot fires, they cook the ground to the point where there's no longer microbes. It will be wasteland for a very, very long time because the nutrients are just cooked out of the soil. So if we were to move that land into the state's possession, which it already is our land, the federal government just has to release its what's called a proprietorial only right. If that became for example, Prescott National Forest, if that became Prescott State Forest, we would be able to go in and treat those areas that are closest to residences. One of the things that we're going to have to get a handle on is zoning. If there are, and I don't think that there's a zoning code for forest only. The bottom line is we have private property rights. We also have private property responsibilities. Those go hand in hand. And if people want to build a house in the forest, that's problematic, and they need to face that. Now, one of the things that we have done also, we held a hearing a couple of weeks ago in the Senate dealing with the fire insurance cancellation crisis. And it is at a crisis point right now where people are losing their homeowners insurance because insurance companies are using an outdated model to assess risk. Now, the bottom line is, and the video from Project Veritas, or I think it was James O'Keefe that caught a State Farm official talking about we don't care. That guy was fired like within 24 hours. I think that the insurance companies, and I'm not an insurance guy, but I think they do care. They are there obviously to make a profit. Well, right now, claims are exceeding the premiums that are being paid. So we are in pursuit of a solution, and this is not an easy thing because we're not the ones that created the problem. Cal Forestry, the Sierra Club, Center for Biological Diversity, with all of their lawsuits preventing the thinning of forests, the proper management of wildlands. Then you've got U.S. Forest Department, you've got BLM. All of those contributed to creating the problem that the people of Arizona now are paying the price for. So that's why it becomes a federal problem. I've proposed that we take something similar to flood insurance. Anybody who buys a house in a flood zone, a 100-year flood zone, has to buy flood insurance. Well, there's also a notion right now that we need to create hurricane insurance for the folks out east. They've had so many devastating losses that the insurance companies cannot keep up with claims with the premiums that are being paid without jacking the premiums up to the point where people can't afford them. All right, that's a problem. The only thing that isn't covered in this is earthquakes. So as you look at the four calamities, we have hurricanes, earthquakes, floods. Those have very little to do with land management. They're natural events. Fire, on the other hand, number 4, that has to do with man's mismanagement of the land. Yes, we're going to have fires. Fires are actually a healthy thing. The indigenous people that were here long before White Eye, they used fire in order to keep a healthy forest floor, in order to feed game. They knew that if they burned off the dead grass and the beetles and all the pests and all the gnats and mosquitoes and all that, they burned all that off, they would have fresh grass come back in the spring. Okay. They did that for centuries, by the way, before we Anglos even arrived. So now we've got this notion, and it's promoted by some people would call them the deep breathing tree huggers, who think that trees have a soul. They're trees. They're also the best carbon dioxide sequestration device. Let's try and say that twice. They're the best carbon dioxide sequestration device out there. Carbon dioxide is food for trees. So if you want to control the amount of carbon dioxide, mature trees need to be thinned. That's called harvesting timber. The immature trees that are drawing up water and actually having a negative effect on the watershed, those also need to be treated, removed from the forest floor. That takes money, and we are appropriating millions of dollars to do that work. We put millions of dollars into rural firefighting. I've got a bill, an appropriations bill, that's going to put roughly $3.5 million into the Prescott Airport. That will increase pad space. So the interagency fire crews, that'd be the aircraft that do slurry drops, have sufficient space to reload their firefighting drop capsules that are filled with slurry. The problem that we have is with our elevation, our runway isn't quite long enough for what they call heavies. That'd be the DC-10s. They can only fill up 50% of their capacity. We need a longer runway. We need pad space. We need a greater capability. There is no doubt that the forest fire season this year is probably going to be a record season. We're hoping that we get more rain, but we are in a cycle right now, and it's a predictable planetary cycle, that we are going to see an increase in drought conditions probably for the next few years until we start seeing more rain. Well, so, I mean, there's a whole lot that goes into this.
Yeah.
So I think pretty sophomoric for people to come out and say, well, you should have put that money someplace else. Well, bottom line is we couldn't, number one. Number two, we do have new money, tax money, that is going to fire suppression and fire prevention in the tune of, to the level of millions of dollars at the state level. Now it's time for the federal government to step up. They created the problem. They're going to have to be a major part of the solution for the problem.
Okay. Senator, thank you. I think that's a good idea, putting you and the fire chiefs, maybe a couple of them together on a show, and let's discuss this, because we want to ease the tension of a lot of citizens. I've had a lot of comments and a lot of concerns. So thank you for addressing that. And thank you for taking time out. I know you're going back to the floor at the Capitol, so thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Mark Finchem has been my guest on this session of Yavapai Speaks, and I hope you'll join us again. Thank you.